order on this day, Tuesday, nope, the Tuesday, August 15th, 2023 at 4 p.m. The board members are present here at the City Hall along with members of the public with the assistance of the Communications Department and the Information Technology Department. This meeting is live streamed on the Ethics Board's website, and we are recording it for future reference. There is a delay with an online communications. We should all be patient. As always, we thank those members of the City of Tallahassee for their support. For those attending the meeting online, please make sure your microphone is muted. I know she is not currently here, but I want to thank Vice Chair Christian Costa for acting in my stead. From what I saw, she did a great job. Last week, we asked the public to make a request by email to ethics@talgov.com by 1 p.m. on the day of the meeting if they wish to speak online on agenda or non-agenda items. Those who have submitted their names will be given a chance to speak as scheduled. While the meeting is in progress, please do not speak during the board's discussion. We have set aside 2 places on the agenda where the public can speak. For those of you who wish to make a public comment, please complete a speaker request form and forward it to the administrative specialist, Ms. Tasker Leverson Green. Public speakers will be given 3 minutes in accordance with the board's bylaws. At this time, please rise for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time I ask Ms. Tasker for a roll call.
Carlos Ray,
Present.
Kirsten Costa, Ernie Payne,
Here.
Patrick Kelly,
Here.
Rika Calhoun, Adam Commissar.
Here.
Mr. Chair, the physical presence of 4 or more board members are required to have a quorum. Since we have fewer than 4 board members attending in the meeting in person, we do not have a quorum. This does prohibit members online from participating, but you cannot stage a vote.
Okay.
It does allow, yeah.
So with that being said, we cannot vote on any business items, so we'll move from past the approval of minutes, because at this time we cannot vote on the minutes. So we'll move on to public comments, agenda items. Comments?
Yes, we have 2 public comments, one from Mr. Ben Wilcox, agenda item number 9, and Mr. Richard Herring, agenda item number 10.
Mr. Wilcox?
Sure. At your last meeting, I provided the board with an update on the lobby registrations here for the City of Tallahassee. And Mr. Chair, I'm sorry that I won't go through the whole presentation again, but I wanted to just update the numbers that I gave out the last time. As of June 14th, there were 4 registered lobbyists with the City of Tallahassee. And last year at that same time, there were 23 registered lobbyists. That number this year has now ticked up to 7 registered lobbyists. And the only other information I have that's new is that I didn't have information for the county at the last meeting, but I do now, and the county lists 47 registered lobbyists.
Just for my own verification, what is the registration fee for a county?
$25.
Okay. Sad. Thank you for the update, Mr. Wilcox. Mr. Herring.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say we all reviewed the materials on the whistleblower complaint and the request for an attorney general opinion. And while no 2 attorneys would do the same thing the same way, we as a group want to commend John, look up. We want to commend your board attorney for a really well-researched set of materials that takes on hard issues in a fair and open way. And, we think is the most liable to give you a correct answer. So thank you to your board attorney.
Yes, we're very happy with the work as well. Already do we do a roll call? How we
Acknowledge her.
acknowledge our Vice Chair, Christian Costa, is now present at the meeting, so we currently have a quorum. Should we go back to number 4, agenda item number 4? Did everybody receive the minutes for the June 2023 meeting? Any comments or edits to the minutes? If there are none, is there a motion to approve? Costa moves, Mr. Bank seconds, all in favor? Aye, those opposed, motion passes. Is that it for public comments, Ms. Tasker?
Yes.
All right. Moving on to agenda item number 6, Ethics Office Report.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm going to say to Chief Kelly, who's online, we can't actually see you, so make sure you speak up if you have something to say. Don't wait on us to acknowledge you. Second, to everyone in the room, we're working on a 40-minute time limit with WebEx. The technician on the other end will let us know when it's about to shut down, and she will reestablish it. We'll take a moment to reestablish it and continue. I won't go into the details of it, but that's what we're working with today. With regard to the report, it's similar to past reports. We are continuing to provide ethics training to new employees. The new member orientation, we do at least once a month. We provided 2 informal advisory opinions that you will see next month. And we attended 2 seminars with the Council on Government Ethics Laws. We maintain our administrative duties, conducted weekly meetings with the board chair, and responded to ethics complaints. We prepared for this meeting and continued other duties. With regard to the budget, this is a year-to-date summary of the budget. It left us with $125,918, and that was as of last week, like last Friday. So I project that by the end of the fiscal year, we'll have somewhere around $70,000. So whatever we need to purchase, we're gonna purchase in August and September. Like, we'll get a 3-minute clock that we didn't want to buy. We'll go ahead and get one. And we're gonna get new computers because they're blanking out on us. And some of the equipment that I've been using personally to do the online training, I'm gonna get that so that the board will have its own. So we'll make good use of as much of that money as we can before the next fiscal year begins responsibly. Any questions about the budget?
Because it is a use it or lose it, right?
Correct. It does not carry over. If we buy it now, then we can start off the year in good shape. Any other questions? Lastly, these are the calls we got within almost 2 months since the last time we met. June 11th, 2023. Actually had to borrow an employee who knew Spanish. She spoke with the caller who needed help to assess her food stamps. She was calling children and families and no one would respond. She was doing what they said, she says, and it wasn't helping. Through the interpreter, I got enough information. I tried calling children and families. I couldn't get them. And I remembered from my days at FDLE, if you contact the governor's office, people respond. So I sent a message to the governor's office. The governor's office got in touch with children and families and she got help. That was fun. 6/16/2023, individual said he was terminated from a store. I let him know that was not within our jurisdiction. I left him a message. 6/21, complaint reported an experience with city employee said she was driving recklessly and threatened her safety. I referred her to the complaint to the Human Resources Department, and I know that they followed up. They didn't have to, but they let me know some of the things that they were doing. So they did follow up. 6:26, the call identified himself as a Tallahassee resident and spoke at length about instances where customer service was poor and city employees lacked empathy. He shared an incident with Dollar Ride where he says they didn't drop him off where he asked to be dropped off. I later learned that he was under investigation because he didn't handle things right. He called me and asked me for help with getting a ride after they had excused him and allowed him services again. Um, and But it wasn't a legitimate complaint. And the only thing that I got out of it is every day I get an email from him, as do other people. I recommend closing that one. On 7/18, Mr. James Jackson called to say he had been accused of harassment by the Tallahassee police and threatened with arrest. He actually showed up at the police department in a bathrobe. And he said that they probably thought he was crazy. Go figure. He discussed filing an ethics complaint and wanted to know what he could do about poor treatment. I directed him to the online form, but I encouraged him to read the criteria for filing a complaint, and I haven't heard from him since. So I recommend closing that one. 7:28, the caller raised concerns that he'd been experiencing sewage backup in his home several months. I talked people in housing and compliance. They put me in touch with code enforcement, and code enforcement promised that they would give him a call. So all the calls were handled. I recommend closing.
Any questions on the report? Is there a motion to approve the recommendation of the officer to close these? Motion and second, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, motion passes. Moving on to agenda item number 7, general update. Mr. Floyd.
Yes. Three things. First of all, I contacted FSU. We still have a vacant position there. They have not made an offer yet. They've been working on it since January. They haven't made an offer yet. Either that or no one accepted their offer. I talked to the chief of staff. The only thing I could say was good luck with such an important position. So only thing we can do with that is wait. With regard to campaign contribution refund program, we are working diligently. When I say I do mean we, Ms. Tasker is very engaged with this. And we're putting a package together. John has helped with an op-ed for the Tallahassee Democrat. And when we move forward, we're putting together a brochure. We're talking to organizations to set up meetings where we can come in and talk to organizations. And writing a letter for the candidates, because we're going to give the candidates a kit, little kit, with information and brochures and forms and things that they can use, and try to explain to them why it would be in their interest to do this. So we're diligently working on that. The League of Voters, we reached out to them, but they, after us trying in 2 instances and John helping me draft something to explain our role, they still had concerns, and that this may reach some of the new laws when it comes to voter registration. And I think they were just uncomfortable. I think they really understand. So I didn't press it anymore. We may or may not hear from them, but they won't be able to participate. And finally, Tasker has some comments about your pictures and bios.
Yes, I'll be forwarding, each one of you, I haven't received one yet from you. But the current bios that we have on file, I'll forward that information back to you all to see if you wanna update it. If not, then I'll use that information. I'm asking for a professional type headshot, so we can attach that with your, bio.
We want nice military pictures with slick haircut. We're putting this in the annual report and we'll update the ethics guide. So that's why we're asking. Thank you, Tasker. And that is the general update, Mr. Chair.
Sounds good. Moving on to the moment everybody's been waiting for, ethics training by Mr. John Reed.
Exciting.
we have a drum roll?
Yeah.
All right, okay, so, up here on the screen, we've got some slides. We're gonna try to go through this and I will try to go fast.
Yes, and before he starts, we need a sergeant at arms. He has 30 minutes.
That's fine. I don't think that's gonna be a problem.
All right.
So, what did I just do here? Oh, yeah, okay. So what we want to discuss today, ethics in the law, why are we here? How did we get here? State code versus Tallahassee code, what are the differences? And then two prohibited acts that we typically don't see very often that we want to discuss, expanded abstentions and disclosure or use of non-public information. Ethics and the Florida Constitution. The ethics is mandated in the Florida Constitution in Article 2, Section 8, and it provides a lot of different issues dealing with who public officers involved with a felony, et cetera. It also, it says, and then this is the newer issue about the lobbyist restrictions that was just passed by the voters, just took effect January 1st of this year. And then we have elected, and then I think really the part that's most important is a code of ethics for all state employees is created and prescribed by law. They discuss a public officer, public employee shall not abuse their public position. Kind of lays out one of the prohibited acts that we see in statute. But this essentially mandates that the legislature pursue ethics. So it's not something that's optional, it's something that's required. And then we continue there, and then you have your citation, Article 2, Section 8. So next, after the charter, you go to the state statute, what provides the state statute to authorize that those of us in this room sit here today. And it's Section 112.326, which allows local governments and or political subdivisions to create officer employees and hold them to more stringent standards of conduct than are required by the state. So that's the authority that we have here. We then go back to the charter amendment from 2014, which adopted multiple sections in the 60s. This is section 61, 61A, directs the city commission to enact an ethics code within 6 months. Subsection B creates the ethics board, and then following that, not in a subsection, but we have the list of duties that are assigned to the Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board, and that's the Tallahassee Charter, Section 63. Am I moving fast enough here?
You
Good, all right.
Too fast.
Too fast?
You
Okay,
can slow down a little bit.
okay. Here's the ethics code. This is section 112.313 primarily. We have the solicitation and acceptance of gifts, doing business with one's agency, authorized compensation, which kind of goes hand in hand. Misuse of public position, which is something we have, conflicting employment or contractual relationship, disclosure or use of certain information, and then voting conflicts. If you compare that to what we have in Tallahassee, we do not have 3 of these, but we do have solicitation of gifts, misuse of public position, disclosure of certain information, and voting conflicts. And then one that's not in the state statute that we also have is the offer of employment. So when we have a standard complaint form that this board previously approved that has 5 check marks where they can put a check mark to identify which violations have occurred. And these are the 5 prohibited acts that we identify in our complaints that we are authorized to investigate and bring complaints under. We typically only see 2 of those, the misuse of public position and the solicitation or acceptance of gifts. But there are others, the failure to disclose offers of influence, expanded abstention, and disclosure or use of non-public information. So we'll try to go over some of those that are not commonly seen. First one is the expanded abstention requirements. This is essentially your voting conflicts section. This requires our elected officials, the city commissioners, to abstain from voting on any measure before the city. And then here we have under a duty of reasonable inquiry that they knew or should have known that the measure would inure to his or her special private gain or loss. Now, this is a little different than the state. The state, and I put this first, we're gonna go to the state, and then I want to come back to the local. The state, the legislature got a little cute, and they have a stricter standard for the legislature, or for the local officials than they have for themselves, which isn't really a surprise. And then this is somewhat in the middle, but it has additional requirements, your B, C, D, and E, that aren't in the state statute, that would be applicable under the new standards set in this section, this subsection A. So if you go to state law, I point back to the 1935 case Stubbs v. Florida State Finance Company. And that really was when the first case in Florida where they really articulated what government ethics was. A public official cannot legally participate in his official capacity in the decision of a question in which he is personally and adversely interested, thus causing him to occupy a position where his duty as a public official is in conflict with his personal interest. Now, it took about 40 years for the legislature to catch up to the Supreme Court, and they finally did codify this concept into statute, specifically in section 112.3143. So here's what that statute does. It deals with public officers. What's a public officer? It's a person elected or appointed to hold office in an agency, including a person serving on an advisory boards, similar to what we have for public official. And that's kind of when we drafted our code, we kind of based our public official language on this definition here. The general rule is that if you're a member of a collegial body at a local or state level, you're going to be subject to this voting conflicts statute. Now, here's where the two different standards apply. For state elected or appointed officers, they may not vote on any matter that he or she knows will inure to his or her special private gain or loss. I underlined key language, knows. They have to actually have knowledge that what they're doing would provide some type of financial benefit or loss. And then special private gain or loss, and we'll get into the details on why the word special is so important. Now, this is state elected and appointed officials. You move down to your county and municipal elected and appointed officers. They may not vote on any measure which would inure to his or her special private gain or loss. So the language is very similar to the state, except the word knows is missing. Here, it is more of a strict liability standard. If they do it, they do it. It doesn't matter whether they do or not. Now, if the special private gain or loss were to extend to another person, then that is where the legislature used the word knows, and it requires some type of knowledge by the elected official or the appointed official. And if that would be of a special private gain or loss would extend to a principal by whom he or she is retained, a parent organization or subsidy of a corporate principal by whom the officer is retained, a relative, or a business associate. So the first one is their own personal self. We know that. The third parties, let's go through those individuals. Who is a principal? That is an employer. If somebody's I think most of our city commissioners, this is their full-time job, but a lot of municipalities, that's a part-time job. They have a real job, and then they serve on their governing body of their local government. So they have to make sure they're not doing something that would benefit an employer. A client, if you're a lawyer, I always think a client is your boss when you're a lawyer. Same with accountant, insurance, or any professional practice. Your client is essentially your boss, and that would fall under the definition of a principal. And then a corporation for which the public officer serves as a compensated director. And there's case law that says it has to be compensated for this to be triggered. Relative. This is important because this is a very narrow definition in the voting conflict statute. It is really only the nuclear family and maybe 1 degree out. Father, mother, son, daughter, husband, wife, brother, sister, then your in-laws. Like I said, this is very narrow when you look at other areas of chapter 112, part 3, and I'll show you 2 of those right now. The basic definition that's in the state ethics code includes everybody. Father, mother, son, and then you get down to person who is engaged to be married, or otherwise holds himself or herself out as or is generally known as the person whom the public officer employee intends to marry or with whom the public officer employee intends to form a household. So in most of your ethics cases, that relative definition is extremely broad. Now, if you move to the nepotism statute, it's broader than the voting conflicts, but nowhere close to where the state ethics is. And that includes what we see in the voting conflicts, which is your nuclear family and 1 degree out, but then they also go to your step parents, step siblings, etc. So there are 3 different definitions, and that's why when we're doing our analysis, we always need to figure out which definition we're supposed to use. A business associate, the Florida Commission on Ethics has found that a business associate, somebody that you're carrying out a business enterprise with. First bullet, are they engaging in a common commercial entrepreneurial pursuit? And is it a current ongoing business relationship? I think an example is if I wanted to have somebody come by and clean the carpets in my house and I hired them to clean the carpets of my house, and then I was a city commissioner and there was a vote to give them city business, do I have a business relationship? Are they a business associate? And that would not be, because we're not working together and it's not an ongoing business relationship. So you really have to be partners. You have to be working together, not just have some type of casual business interaction in order to trigger the business associate voting conflict. Special private gain or loss. The gain or loss must be special. That's that last part. Just a simple gain or a simple loss is not enough to trigger the voting conflict. The gain or loss must be an economic benefit or harm. Now we go next to what is special. Gain or loss must be special. To be considered special, you have to look at these following factors: the size of the class affected by the vote, the nature of the interests involved, the degree to which the interest of all members of the class are affected by the vote, the degree to which the officer, his or her relative, business associate, or principal receives a greater benefit or harm when compared to other members of the class. So we'll go to those more in detail. Size of the affected class. The size is very important when you determine whether there's a special benefit or loss. The smaller the class, the greater chance you're going to have a special gain or a special loss. Conversely, the larger the class, the lower the chance of that. However, even in a larger class, if a public official, if they're acting on their own behalf, they receive a larger benefit or loss, then even though it's a large class, it could be seen as a special gain or loss. I think an example is a city commissioner is going to vote to maybe cut property taxes. If they own property in Tallahassee, they're going to benefit from that. And they voted to provide themselves a financial benefit, but they also provided that same benefit to everybody within city limits. And they don't receive any benefit that's disproportionately larger than anybody else. So in that case, that would not be a special gain, or in that case would be a gain. So that's essentially the type of analysis you need to look at when you're looking at the size of the affected class and whether it affects the voting conflict and triggers that statute or ordinance. Or remote or speculative. There has to be a chance that it is going to happen. This is always going to be very fact specific, and you're going to want to analyze this on a case by case basis. But if it is so remote or speculative that it can't be said to inure a gain or loss to the public officer, anything could be possible if you really wanted to discuss it that way. But there has to be a real chance that this is going to occur. And of course, this is going to be determined case by case. Procedural or preliminary. This one is kind of important. I like this one. If there is a vote that you are going to have to abstain from because you're conflicted, and there is some type of procedural vote prior to the vote that you need to abstain from, generally you can vote on the procedural vote. For instance, if there is a vote to table, like today we tabled the voting of the minutes so we could get quorum. A vote like that is not really a substantive vote, so that wouldn't trigger a voting conflict. There are cases, however, when it does, and that would be, for instance, if the procedural vote has the effect of passing or defeating whatever you would have to conflict from. So let's say there is a vote that you would have to abstain from because if the vote, the initiative, ordinance, whatever it may be, passes, you are going to suffer financially. So you'd prefer it to not pass. You vote to table it, and essentially by running it out of the meeting, the issue dies because maybe you don't have time to bring it up at another meeting. In a case such as that, a procedural vote would be seen as substantive, and that would trigger the voting conflict statute. Also, preliminary would be like a feasibility study. I'm town attorney for a municipality. We had this issue last night where we had to vote on a feasibility study for a construction project that we're looking at doing. The feasibility study is just, it doesn't say you're moving forward. It just sees if it's feasible. And if you're going to have a conflict in the eventual project, you could vote on the feasibility study, but when the project comes around, that is when you would have to abstain. All right, so how do you handle a voting conflict? One, you abstain. Two, you have to disclose the conflict orally prior to the vote. And if you're appointed public officer, disclose the conflict orally before participating in the discussion. So that's, for instance, if you're the city manager, you obviously don't have a vote, but you're going to participate in the discussion. So you would disclose before that discussion. And then you have to file a conflict memorandum, which is Form 8B within 15 days. That is what the form looks like. And it is available at the Florida Commission on Ethics website. And you file that with the city clerk. How do you complete the form? Identify all the conflicts. If there's more than one, provide as much detail as possible. It's important if you're an attorney that you cognizant of what your duties are under the Florida bar. For instance, if you are an attorney sitting on a city commission and one of your clients appears before the city commission, you have to abstain. You need to disclose why you're abstaining, but you can't do so in a manner that would violate the rules of confidentiality under the Florida bar. So that's an important point for attorneys that are serving as public officers. And state law does not require the person abstaining to leave the room during the debate or vote. However, the Tallahassee ordinance does require that. Now, I mentioned the Tallahassee has a more stringent voting conflicts law. The first section maybe is not more stringent because there is this reasonable inquiry language and they have to know or should have known. But and the abstaining orally from during the meeting is consistent with state law. What is more stringent is letter C, that they are required to leave the meeting chambers during the discussion. And they also have a language about if the elected official had a business relationship with the past 12 months, but experiences no special private gain or loss under state law. You have a conflict if you experience the special gain or loss. Here, if you don't experience a special gain or loss, you could still participate, but you have to disclose it. So that's an area that's very different from state law. And then E is, it mentions us. This, I think, was adopted in 2015. We've never dealt with this, and I don't know if we ever will, but it just says we're supposed to recommend ordinance changes on how to deal with censure or penalties for anybody that violates. And it says this paragraph, it should say this section. But I think we, in the past, I think when Richard was chair, we had said, you know, this is something that the commission probably should address. They should police themselves. So we never really addressed that.
So what would we do if somebody gave us an ethics complaint?
Well, we would just pursue it like we would a regular ethics complaint.
If we find probable cause and
We do everything that we would normally
the
do.
penalties?
Yeah, but we don't, but we don't have the ability to censure. And I think that's, I guess the penalty really is, I was thinking penalty from the city commission. But yes, censure, we don't deal with. They would have to really do that themselves. The penalty, I guess, would really fall what we apply to all of our violations. The next one is disclosure or use of non-public information. This language kind of went back and forth. This is the original ordinance that was adopted in 2019. There was a drafting error, so when it went out, it said a public official or employee of the city, which is our broadest coverage, it covers pretty much everybody that we would have jurisdiction over, shall not disclose or use information that's not available. And then in the second half, it refers to the covered individual's personal gain. So the two terms didn't match. And there was some confusion there. We had made a recommendation that we would apply this to all public officials and employees of cities. The city preferred to just have it applied to covered individuals. So this is the actual ordinance as it is written today, adopted in 2022. It's only covered individuals that shall not disclose or use information that is not available to members of the public. So I think when we had discussed, I don't know how many of you were here when we were dealing with that. I may not have been, but I think we talked about if you're a procurement officer, you know that a bid's going out, or you know what factors are going to be looked at when a bid's received, and you feed that information to maybe a developer, it's going to be bidding on a project. That would clearly be a disclosure or use of non-public information. But what about that procurement officer's secretary? What if they overheard the discussion and gave it to the developer? We would not have grounds to go after the secretary under the way the ordinance is written. However, they could have an ethics complaint under the state, because the state, in this case, the state is stricter than what we have for the disclosure or use of non-public information. So they're not totally off the hook, but they are with us. Does that
Right.
make sense? Okay.
When I teach it, I still teach this to everybody, because whether it's the state or the city ordinance, it's a violation. They can still get in trouble, so I still tell them about it.
Okay. And then this is essentially the ordinance broken into clauses, and this is how we essentially evaluate every complaint that we receive. We essentially break every prohibited act into its elements and go through and answer and to decide whether we're going to continue to move on. In this case, is the person, the respondent, a covered individual? If they are, we move on. If they're not, then we know we could dismiss the complaint. Did they disclose or use information? Yes, okay, well, was it not available to members of the public? We could keep answering yes, then we go next. Was it gained by reason of his or her official employee, except for information relating to exclusively to governmental practices? That's language that we took directly from the state statute. But essentially, it's something that they have to learn in their job, but it's not available to the public. And then it's for their personal gain or benefit, or the personal gain or benefit of any other person or business entity. So essentially, if we receive a complaint under this 12-17, we would lay out the facts. Dwight and I would talk, and we'd go through each of these elements. And if we answer yes to all of these bullet points, then we would say, okay, there's legal sufficiency. If assuming everything is true in the complaint, the answers are yes, then we would say there's legal sufficiency. And then if we get past that point, the preliminary investigation would determine what facts would lead to probable cause to answer yes to those questions. And then if we got past that and we had to proceed to DOA, then we would have to show by clear and convincing evidence that the answer is yes to all of these different elements. So, and I think next week we'll go into some of the other ones that we deal with and break those into pieces to see how the analysis will be done. So on the grand finale of my ethics training next month, here's what we plan on discussing. We'll do misuse of public position, which is something we've seen a lot of, the state law versus the local ordinance. What are the differences? I know a lot of you have heard that a million times. It all goes back to that word corruptly, but we'll discuss that as well. Failure to disclose offers of influence in employment, solicitation, or acceptance of gifts. And then I also want to jump into the state ethics code. We don't have ordinances dealing with these issues, but they are in 112.313. So we'll want to go over doing business with one's agency or conflicting employment or contractual relationships. And that is all I have. Did I get it in 20?
Good.
All right.
Very
Okay.
28.
Thank you, John.
All right.
And my purpose for asking to do this In part, we have it in the bylaws that you're supposed to receive training every year, but the other part is do as much as we can to empower you so that you're fully knowledgeable on our jurisdiction and parameters and so that you can move forward, make sure you're in control and guiding us and not others. That's our purpose.
Thank you very much, Mr. Reed. Moving on to agenda item number 9, review of the City Commission Ethics Workshop in 2022. Mr. Floyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And there was an ethics workshop with the city commission in February, I believe it was February 16, 2022. And to go back a little bit further, when I arrived, this is one of the discussions that we had. And it was sort of like, go and come up with some recommendations. We'll know what it looks like when we see it. And so we actually, and I suggested we sit down with the coalition because I knew they had some ideas. And done work from what they gave us. And the board actually went forward with everything they recommended. We didn't expect that, but that's what happened. And it was some good recommendations. John continued to work with them and craft them and make them the board's recommendations so that what eventually came from the board. And these, as you see here, you see in black is what recommended and what you see in red, and I'll run through those for you. The first one, draft ordinance number 02-ORD01, suggest redefining lobbying in place exceptions and definitions in one place. At the time, no actions was taken. However, later the city adopted a revised definition on their own. Then it was still different from what the board proposed. Codify information already in the current annual registration form. No action was taken. Require covered individuals to ensure lobbyists are properly registered. No action was taken. Require registered lobbyists to maintain and submit logs documenting contact with covered individuals. And I recall they were a little concerned about getting in a gotcha moment in dealing with that, so no action was taken on that. Ban contingency fees for lobbyists appearing before the city. They accepted that recommendation and made changes. Codify requirements for a compensation report and make the report available to the public on the city's website. Positive response from the city commission was no one had requested a copy of said compensation report in several years. So instead of providing compensation reports on the website, city commission removed the requirement altogether. Draft ordinance number 20-ORD02 was add lobbyists appearing before the city to the person subject to the board's jurisdiction. No action was taken on that. Honestly, we didn't expect that one. Draft ordinance,
That was a charter amendment.
okay.
That was, yeah.
Okay. Draft ordinance number 21-ORD-01, misuse of position, redefine misuse of position to limit the violation to those acts inconsistent with the proper performance of a public official or employee. And they accepted that one. Dismissals and recommend remedial actions allow the board to dismiss complaints at any stage of the administrative process and enact remedies less than investigations and hearings. They accepted that one. And if you ever worked on a discipline board, sometimes they negotiate settlements before it goes any further. So that was the concept. Use of disclosure of non-public information, as John stated, correct a scrivener's error within the definition of use of disclosure of non-public information so that the provision included covered individuals and city employees. City commission, and up to that point, we interpreted it as including everybody. But the city commission restricted the board's jurisdiction to just covered individuals. Jurisdiction of Tallahassee Independence X Board, we asked to clarify the city's intent and codify the city ordinance to the extent to which the board had jurisdiction of city public officials and employees over what's referred to outside agencies such as CRA and Blueprint. No action was taken. There was discussion And where we really left is the city, we disagree with the city. City believes that we have no authority over city employees who work with the CRA and the blueprint. And, you know, when you think about it, city commission members are made of the board for the CRA and the blueprint. And John explained that gave the perspective that in certain instances, not in all, he believed and the board accepted his recommendation on that, that in certain instances, we do have jurisdiction. And that's where we kind of left it and basically said, if there is a violation, we will act on it and then they can do whatever they want to do with that. But they're responsible for their actions. Whistleblower protections grant authority for the Tallahassee Independent Ethics Board to operate in conjunction with the Office of Inspector General as an appropriate local official or separately in a limited capacity. City Commission directed the board to confer with the Inspector General, which is what we did. And as you know, we brought it back to them after that. And then they asked to delay it to give the city attorney a chance to respond. And in turn, we asked for an advisory opinion for the Attorney General. And that's where we are. And after that, on March 31st, the chair sent a letter to the commission basically thanking them for hearing our recommendations as required in the ordinance. And it essentially says, we're giving it to you, we're giving it you our recommendations, and now you're responsible. And with that, I'll turn it back over to the chair.
Yeah, so for members who were not there at the time of this workshop, it was a leap from what it was previously. So a year prior to that, there was a the city did have a workshop regarding ethics ordinance, but we weren't really participants, we're just out in the audience. At this time, we were actually invited to sit at the table with city commissioners and discuss our recommendation. It was a hearty discussion. It was about a 2-hour meeting almost, where we went back and forth discussing our recommendations. The city attorney was there as well. So we, as you know, we upheld our duties to make recommendations to the city, and our recommendations were an effort to clarify our objectives of what we are to do as an ethics board, make it easier for them, because basically our job here is to make their job easier, to help them avoid all the pitfalls that may impede their ability to do their job. So our recommendations were in that effort. They went opposite directions. Some recommendations we gave, some of them they did accept, which is great. And we are operating with the tools we have, and we have, since the inception of this board, have continually grown in our authority, our credibility, and our ability to carry out our duties as a board. And all the past chairmen have made that possible. And we continue to make our recommendations. That's our job. And at this time, would it be would it be worth the effort to make a recommendation that was rejected by the same board? You follow Einstein's recommendation. If you follow the same thing over and over again, expect different results, that's insanity. So you wait for the right time. And if we have recommendations, I know there's some issues that come up, always, when it comes to rhetoric, know when the time is right to make a position or make an argument. And at this time, it may not be the right time to make those discussions or bring it up. I know there is discussion to revisit the charter, to open the charter itself to recommendations, and that may be opportunity for us to voice our opinion as well. So that's something we're gonna watch when they recommend opening the charter for considerations. That's something we should be monitoring as well. But I want to thank the staff, our attorney, the members of the public who made those recommendations, who participated in this process. We made strides there, but we'll continue to work on it as best we can. Mr. Banks.
Hey.
Banks, sorry. I was saying Banks. Banks. Banks, I said Mr. Payne.
Oh, nice. Put that in the notes.
That, yes.
This is actually, I had requested Mr. Floyd add an item on the agenda relating to such things, and you started the discussion with this workshop, with the discussion of the workshop, and you're you've just said, so I just want to follow up. Uh, At our last meeting, we started, I thought, a very good discussion with, started with Mr. Wilcox and his alerting us to the effect of the lobbying fees. And Mr. Commissar and Mr. Kelly jumped in and wanted to do something. And I felt like I was kind of holding them back because I'd been there and I saw the problems, and we are still dealing with the same city commission. But Mr. Kelly said something that I really appreciated. That his view was, if you fail first time, you don't just sit back and give up. Approach it another way. And I was thinking of how we could approach things another way. And I was starting the same way that you did with the workshop, which is all recorded on the city's website that you all can see. And there are some areas that elected officials and appointed officials had legitimate arguments in opposition to what we had. For instance, there was some of the city commissioners objected to our recommendation to require covered individuals to ensure lobbyists are properly registered. She didn't feel that it was her job as a city commissioner to ensure that lobbyists are registered. That's really a clerical function, not a policymaking function. Not, and I agree with that, really. It's, if it falls anywhere, it'd be under the city treasurer's treasurer clerk's office he coordinates most of the lobbying. That's just one example that if we go back and see what exactly the objections were to our recommendations, maybe we can approach it from a different way. Mr. Reed has already done all the legal research and all that and done it very well. And we agreed with what he put forth, but I think it'd be important to specifically address the concerns that they had, maybe meet in person with the treasurer clerk, just since he does coordinate most of the lobbying functions. He's got some ideas. He had discussed some of them with me last year. The issue of expanding the board's jurisdiction to lobbyists. Now that's a big problem, but maybe we can get some ideas about how to approach it if we approach the treasurer clerk and see what his objections are. The city attorney had a lot of objections to some of what we recommended. A lot of that was that it's already covered in state statute, as we covered, as discussed with the issue of non-disclosure of information. The main issue there, and any of these issues, sure, they are covered by state statute, but they're out of our jurisdiction, so that we can't do anything with it, which is our whole point in being here. So my recommendation, first of all, it's been over a year since we made recommendations. It's something we need to keep in the forefront and start working on some things. But we just need to approach it in a less from a legal perspective and going back to their specific objections and addressing each of those issues specifically with a discussion, the kind of thing that this workshop was supposed to be. I don't think it adequately just covered all of the issues involved in that particular workshop. We could have used another workshop maybe, or just an extension of it. But the issue of the lobbyist fees, the registration fee, that was never covered in anything here. And I believe the treasurer clerk contacted Mr. Floyd before he made the suggestion to eliminate the fee altogether. And at that point, he thought that it was just an administrative function and his bailiwick and didn't affect ethics at all. But we've seen the effect of them instead of throwing out the lobbyist fee, increasing it 20-fold, there are at least some evidence that it's had an effect of keeping lobbyists from registering. So that would be the first recommendation that I would want to put forth, is to go back to at least restore the original fee to match the fee for all the rest of the county government or the local government, the county blueprint, which is all the $25 for the rest of the local government. One of the arguments that the city attorney often makes is that she wants there to be consistency between the city and the county and Blueprint and all the local government entities. That's one instance where they've blown that consistency all out of the water. So that would be an argument to present for them. But basically, I just don't want the discussion to die. I think we need to keep in mind what we need to recommend. I know that there is a push not to consider any major ordinances until there's a whole charter review, which a number of the commissioners are in opposition to as well, because they see that as just basically tying their hands, that nothing can be done until a charter review is done. But all of this is to say that all of these issues are still before us, and we need to not let them die. Just a discussion.
Was there any, did you hear any buzz after the article came out in the Democrat?
I think I got one call, and I can't tell you what it was from, and they were just trying to remember when the last time there was an ethics workshop. That was it.
Okay.
And you, originally, when it came to you, that you thought it was an administrative process, we wouldn't get involved in that. Fee.
The fee?
Yes.
Well, it was a recommendation by the treasurer clerk, and he just wanted to know how we felt about it, and we weren't involved in it.
And we'll be involved now?
I mean, that's up to you.
Yeah.
Ourselves involved.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, it's,
The issue is it an ethics issue or not? And we have seen, because of the lack of the drop in registrations, that it could be. That's not necessarily legal evidence that it has caused that, but there's certainly suspicion, and that when you compare the number of registered lobbyists with the county and I think we should be involved where we weren't before.
Following up on what Mr. Payne was saying, I guess just the general discussion about, do you strike when the iron's hot, when you've got an idea, or do you do it another time? Just throwing it out there is just an idea. If we're already doing an annual report and this board's gonna last in perpetuity, is it something to think about to where we just, as part of our annual report, say, no bullet points this year, or these are the recommendations, and then the body knows they're coming, they can do with them what they want? But is it something where you want that to just become part of an annual thing where it happens, if that's part of what we're charged with, is making recommendations?
I will point out, in the last annual report that we did, Mr. Floyd did a good job of saying, these are what we recommended. And these are what we're not accepted, so.
as far as the process, as far as revisiting what was presented or trying to address the issues they raised, many times it's, we had the workshop, and then it was upon them to bring it before the commission to vote on it. Many of the things were not brought up, and there wasn't much discussion of why or not it was not brought up. So it'd be one of those things to try to read their minds of why it was not brought up to them. I don't want to be in a position that we recommend the same changes, expect a different result, and have them sit before us like, we already did this. We didn't vote on it once. It is necessary. Let's move on. Do you have any other suggestions? Now, if you have suggestions beyond this, we can incorporate some of the other changes And it has to be, I would consider a significant change from previous recommendation. Not the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, because dynamics are what they are in the commission. We have to accept that. One person votes for it, the other people will not vote for it. So that's what you gotta accept the dynamic of this commission we're dealing with. We can sit there in the workshop, make a presentation, and feel good about ourselves. But is really actually getting anything done? You know, I always, if we have recommendations, let's visit, we look at the ordinance, what can be done. If we want to submit again what we did before, then let's find out what is it we can do to actually make it more palpable to them. But if it's gonna be the same thing, again, we're trying to beat them over the head with the same recommendations, it's fruitless. So we can revisit this, if we want to make recommendations, let's talk about which ones we want to focus on, not simply, you guys rejected it once, we're gonna try it again and see if we can wear you down. That's one tactic. It's more like a child's tactic, I feel. Let's make some recommendations. As far as the lobbying, if we make a recommendation, we're kind of insinuating there's an issue here. And you guys, there might be a violation here of ethics, maybe. I don't know if there is or isn't. It's, this is it's gonna be the same commission that voted for it. Ideally, I don't know how we can approach it to actually make them accept it. Ideally, if it won't come from us, better yet. Somebody from in the city itself saying, we're losing our money here, or this is not working for us. If we can look at the notes from that workshop and see clearly where there was conflict or concerns with our recommendation that we can actually address, let's do that. But simply, if those recommendations we ain't even taken up, even considered by the city and the commission, we have nothing to work on other than repeating the same thing over and over again. So you think between John, if you want to work on this, Ernie, and Dwight, do you want to go through that workshop and look at it as well and see the notes and see what the actual concerns were of our recommendations and see if there's a way we can actually address it? If it's not going to be possible to address a recommendation, then it's not fruitful to go forward, same recommendation. But I agree, we should make recommendations anytime we feel there's always work to improve and to progress, but let's not come back with the same ideas and expect different results.
I definitely agree with you there. That's why I was saying, especially not just go back over the notes, but watch the videos.
Yeah, as I say, look at the videos, and that's what I'm looking at.
And to address the specific things and go to the specific people that had objections.
Well, and I was gonna say, I do think that there's power in even just the statement that the Independent Ethics Board continues to recommend the following thing. Doesn't have to mean that we're asking them to vote on them or change them, but that we still hold our stance that these are things that are important that we do think should be addressed. Doesn't mean that we have to workshop it with them, but I do think there's power in maintaining, hey, nothing's changed on our end. This is still important and we still feel it's important. Because I think, one, if we're expecting them to change their mind, no, not necessarily. But I do want them to know, on the other hand, that we have not changed our mind. And so even if they won't change theirs, this is something that we're still holding firm to. Just because they're not going to change their mind doesn't mean that we can change our tactics if we're trying to push. But even just to go on the record as saying, these are things we still would like to see happen. And I don't even think the comment needs to be made. We understand you might not change your mind, but even to say the Independent Ethics Board believes ABC. I still think there's power in that too, even if we're not expecting a different outcome, as much as just holding firm that another year, still, here we are.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir,
Yeah, this is Pat Kelly. I don't know if you can see me. Can you see me?
Yes. You're shining, don't worry.
Okay, or can you see just the top of my bald head?
We can see that.
There you go.
There you go.
I have to tell you, remember last time we talked about this and I was present, it was a little more spirited on my part, and I do appreciate that I got some cerebral matter working hard on in some of your heads, because one of the things we should consider talking about too are the consequences. From the time this originally started being discussed several years ago till now, haven't we seen a significant drop in the number of registered lobbyists in the city?
Yes.
Okay, that's a consequence. Does anyone believe that there's no longer money out there that lobbyists and corporations want or have a vested interest in seeing how it's spent? And I don't think that's the case either. So they're there. They're just going under this consultant or potentially going under this consultant label. And the lack of transparency should concern us all. I think that's the biggest issue of all. Citizens and people who contribute to the revenue of the city should have transparency on who is seeking to spend it and why and how. And that doesn't appear to be the case any longer. If we're losing registered lobbyists, that doesn't necessarily mean that people are no longer lobbying. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yes.
So I think that's the issue here. You know, that the issue with the fee, quite frankly, if there was an ordinance that required people to register as a lobbyist, required to reveal who they're working for and what their interests are, total transparency, whether it was $500 or $25, the people who wanted access to that influence, they'd pay that amount and they'd be registered lobbyists. But somehow people are recognizing that's no longer necessary. I can still lobby, but call myself a consultant, or it appears that way to me. And I don't think that's healthy. We all know the scandal and the problems that the city has seen in the past as a result of this very issue. It seemed it's in our interest as the Ethics Commission, Independent Ethics Board, to make that clear. So one of the things we can look at too. What are the consequences for not putting a sound ordinance in place for lobbying, for registering lobbyists and making sure there's clear transparency in the process? One of them is we're losing registered lobbyists. So, you know, those are the things we should be talking about in the process is what has been the outcome of failure to act on something that I just to me, it seems like common sense. I think we, as public servants, whatever role we serve, should be looking to eliminate the appearance of impropriety anytime we can. And this is a clear example of an appearance of impropriety that needs to be addressed by someone. So I think the fact that we're talking about it and thinking of different strategies to move forward is a good thing. And I'll finally leave it with my final thought is consequences. What are the consequences of not enacting this ordinance? And what we've seen is correct me if I'm wrong, was it 23, 24, 25, or was it more at the beginning of this process? And now we had what, seven registered lobbyists in the city? Is that correct?
That's correct.
That's a significant reduction in people registering lobbyists.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
if I were to take what you all said and turn it into directions to the staff, what I see, what I'm offering, and you can massage it. We outline, and everybody's there. So taking in consideration what everybody's saying, what I outline is a 1, 2, 3, 4-step process. We create a chart with recommendations. It outlines the responses, concerns, consequences, be there any, bring that back to the board, let the board prioritize. If there's anything that wants to act on, they can prioritize that. Then we can go back and redraft and present that to the board and create a final draft that you can present if you so choose.
That works. Anybody?
And I'd be glad to work with you on that.
That makes sense.
That sound okay, John?
Yep. Okay. Sounds good. All right. Moving on to agenda item number 10.
Shoot, John. Battery pin.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just so I can introduce you.
Oh, okay. At our last meeting, the board directed me to prepare an opinion, so a request can be made to the Attorney General regarding whether this board processing some complaints as whistleblower complaints would violate the section 166.021. So you recall there was an opinion that's in your packet, city attorney, where she raised the issue of 166.021. And she also included an attorney general opinion from 1992 regarding the Jacksonville Police and Fire Pension Board of Trustees, which does directly address that same statute. The board asked me to look into this and provide my own opinion so we can request it of the attorney general. See a cover letter here from White to the attorney general's office, the certification that was required. And then 15 is just our minutes to show that the majority of the board was done. And then there's the opinion that I drafted. I focused a great deal on this 166.021 sub 4. And I did look at the case that was referenced by the city attorney's office. I looked at there were quite a few opinions that deal with that ordinance. So I kind of went through all of them and kind of looked at how they compare to one another. Really, when you saw the Attorney General's office say that a referendum would be required, when the ordinance would conflict with what the charter was requiring them to do. So I think in the Jacksonville Police and Fire, I think it changed the structure and powers of the board. There's a case out of the city of Gulfport where they wanted to change the name of the zoning board. But the name was provided for in the charter, so they said you couldn't do that. The Tarpon Springs wanted to create alternate members that were not provided by the charter and let that be done by the city commission. And they said, no, you can't change the composition of the board unless it's done by charter. And it was my conclusion that those were distinguishable. There was a case out in Winter Park that I thought was interesting. In 2009, this is where the charter provided for an appointed board to be filled by appointment of the mayor, and that it had certain time terms, an amount of time for the terms. The charter did not address how those seats would be filled if they were to become vacant by resignation or whatnot. They sought an opinion to say, is that something that could just be done by ordinance, or do we have to go to the voters since the underlying issue is addressed in the charter? The attorney general said that that could be done by ordinance because it didn't conflict with what was in the charter. They said as long as you don't like if you were to, the way I read it, if you filled the vacancy and said, okay, that person now gets a full term instead of filling the remainder of the term, yeah, then you would have a problem because that would conflict with the terms that were laid out in the charter. But they said as long as it doesn't conflict with what's already in the charter about who's appointed and the length of the terms, then they said that would be permissible. Of course, these opinions are just advisory, but it's still worth looking into. This, I know we've gone over this a million times about whether whistleblower is triggered when a complaint comes to us in some cases. I think that it does. But that's more significant if the person seeks to go to circuit court and they need to show that they've exhausted the administrative remedies. I think if they file something with us, regardless of how it's handled by the city, I think they could have a good argument at circuit court to say, no, I met all my requirements because I gave it to the ethics. So I laid that out. I spoke to Ms. Macedo she's a senior assistant attorney general about this. She did raise questions on whether the attorney general had the authority to grant an opinion to us. Although I thought that we did. I pointed to the language that's in essentially a rule. It's their FAQ section on the website, which lays out the rules for requesting opinion. And they have a state and local government section, and then they have boards and commissions as a separate section. I pointed that out to her, and she wasn't aware of the page. we talked about municipality, other unit of local government or public political subdivision. In my opinion, I talked about, um, what do those definitions mean? They mean different things in different places. Political subdivision is used in our state constitution as the definition of a county. But then if you look in certain statutes, it's used to define other things. I mentioned the fact that we are a collegial body, under public records and sunshine, follow those rules that are applicable to collegial bodies. So I played that. So, if they agree, and I talked to her since this was sent in, she appreciated it, thought it made sense. She said she was gonna run it up the ladder and she would get back to me. Even if they say that this is correct, it's discretionary, so they could still say, we're not gonna get involved. But that's, I think we've done everything we can on our end, and now all we can do is wait.
Mentioned in 1996, they issued an opinion to an ethics board in a similar situation.
Oh, yeah, there
I
were.
wasn't aware of that either.
Oh, yeah, I mentioned one, and then it turns out there were 3 cases that I was point to. I knew the Palm Beach. I talked to her, but she said that from a county to city, only the commissions could request the opinions. So then I pointed to this 2010 case where the Palm Beach County Inspector General sought an opinion regarding the ethics board and her office. And they issued a formal opinion in that case. In 2014, the vice chair of the Jacksonville Ethics Commission just himself requested an opinion. They granted an informal opinion, and they said they made it informal because the facts weren't sufficient for them they felt to do a formal opinion. So they could just kind of laid out what the rules were. And then, 1996, Longboat Key Ethics Commission requested an opinion. And it was ironically addressed whistleblower. So I did that in their direction. I did also point out that this ordinance has been changed on a number of occasions. It was changed in 1997, it changed in 2001. If you were to look at those 3 opinions that I noted, so I went back and looked at the legislative history to make sure that we get under a prior reading of the statute, and that subsection 4 was not addressed by those 2 amendments to the statute. So I said, this is an apples to apples comparison. Do with it as you please. So that was it.
Thank you for your work on that, John. That was
Yes, Mr. Payne.
Could I ask, these official Attorney General's opinions, do they carry over when the Office of Attorney General changes? Or they stay in effect as if it were a statute then?
It's sort of, yeah, they have like no weight at all, almost. It's useful guidance. I wouldn't cite them if I was filing, in court. It's like a nice little memo. It's good guidance. Basically, we have an outside entity looking at our ordinance and laws and saying, okay, this is the way we interpret it. It's not even the level of magistrate. So it's useful guidance. We can point to it if it goes one way or the other. Yeah, it carries over. But it's a memo.
Just persuasive.
Yeah.
Persuasive.
It's persuasive enough to say outside entity has looked at the same issues, made this conclusion based on the law. So it's an independent party, looking at basically outside party looking at it, but I wouldn't go to court with it.
I think to answer your question, we could get an ethics opinion in our favor and the city could say, yeah, we disagree. It's a nice sheet of paper.
Yeah. We'll have it.
And if we went to court, it would have no weight. It's really only worth something if we're litigating against the Attorney General.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. But yeah, it'll carry over, but there is much. Thank you, Mr. Reed on that. Now we gotta evaluate Mr. Floyd.
Well, I don't think you can. Have you got them all in yet?
No.
So
So-
we won't say publicly who's have that yet, but
I did it.
how many more do we need?
One,
One, okay.
Chief Kelly.
Wow, she just.
I think the system's broken. I can't hear you.
I think that was a yellow bus. Okay,
So once we get that in,
right, we'll bring it back.
we'll bring it back. Sounds good. Is there any public comment on non-agenda items, Ms. Tasker?
No.
No. Any directives for next meeting? I think we have one already.
Yes.
Any other directives? With that being said, Mr. Payne, moves we adjourn. Costa seconds.
All right,
you all.
thank you all.